Man, you need some Liberty stickers for the back of your truck. At LibertyStickers.com, they've got great state hate, like Pearl Harbor was an inside job. The Democrats want your guns. U.S. Army, die for Israel. Police brutality, not just for black people anymore. And government school, why you and your kids are so stupid. Check out these and 1,000 other great ones at LibertyStickers.com. And of course, they'll take care of all your custom printing for your band or your business at TheBumperSticker.com. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. All right, y'all, welcome back. I'm Scott Horton, and our first guest on the show today is David Enders, special correspondent for McClatchy Newspapers. Welcome back, David. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Very happy to have you here. And you're in Lebanon now, is that right?
I'm in Beirut, yep.
And now, when was the last time you were actually in Syria?
November.
November, okay. But I guess you still got contacts. You're talking on the phone to people in Syria now?
Yeah, no, I'm in daily contact. I attempted to make an aborted trip into Syria a couple weeks ago from Jordan, and we'll be returning probably next week via Turkey.
Well, do be careful. In fact, can you give us an update on the last you've heard from Tice, the missing McClatchy journalist there?
Well, we believe Austin Tice is in the custody of the Syrian government, and we're hoping for his release. They're sort of above my head. I think some possible, we hope, contacts being made.
Okay. Well, we don't want to say too much and screw something up if people are in the middle of negotiating anything, but it was good news. I guess back in November, was it November when they released that video where he's at least still alive?
Yeah. We definitely certainly believe him to be alive and in Syrian government custody.
All right. Well, that's very good to know. So much to cover here. I guess, first of all, your latest piece is titled, "Few Expect Results from Syrian Opposition's Offer to Negotiate Indirectly with Assad." Now, I think if I refer back to just your last few stories, too, it's sort of doubtful that this opposition coalition really does represent the people of Syria. You say in here it's recognized by the U.S. and 70 other countries, but is it recognized by the mass of the Sunni Arab population of Syria as what they want to be their new government?
Well, I think it's moving maybe closer to that. The choice of Mouaz al Khatib as the head of the council, he was jailed and eventually sent into exile for supporting the revolution or the rebellion early. And is the former imam of the Umayyad Mosque, which is sort of the largest, most important mosque, not necessarily the largest, but the most important mosque in Syria. And so there does seem to be a little bit of a movement toward coalescing. Obviously, there's still a huge gap between the politicians outside the country and the people who are doing the fighting on the ground inside. Right.
And now... so it's interesting, isn't it, how lately there have been these leaks. I guess Hillary Clinton had a leak. It seemed like it came from her in the New York Times that she and Petraeus really tried to get Obama to intervene more, and he refused. That was supposed to make him look bad, not her, I guess. Well, he's at least cooperated, right? The Americans have at least been cooperating with the Saudi and Qatari efforts and Turkish efforts to support the rebels. And, of course, as you reported, some of these rebels say they got American training in Jordan. And really it seems like the bottom line is the United States has supported, I think the president has supported the rebels' demand up until this point anyway, or the opposition umbrella group here's demand that Assad leave before any talks begin, at least up until this point. So it seems to me like that's kind of de facto supporting their goals, if not, sending them, helicopters to fly. You know what I mean?
Well, certainly, but there's a big difference between the non-lethal aid and moral support the U.S. has provided and actual arms.
Well, in a way, I guess what I'm trying to say is, doesn't it sound like he's sort of stating that it's the American policy that they not lose, right? Sort of like in Libya, where they said, we have to put up a no-fly zone it's the only way to guarantee the security of these civilians. And then de facto that meant, well, Gaddafi's got to go is the only way to secure these civilians. You know
right.
what I mean?
At this point, it doesn't seem that there's any pressure, via the State Department on the opposition to negotiate directly with the regime or to drop their demands that Assad discuss leaving as a precondition for talks.
But you're saying this guy's gone ahead and done that anyway, or at least begun to put out a little bit of a trial balloon along those lines, it sounds like.
Well, it was a smart move. I mean, in one sense, he's talking to people who support Assad. In another sense, he's speaking to people who are just disillusioned with the rebellion and the lawlessness and lack of services that's permeated a lot of the areas under rebel control. So in one sense, the overture wasn't necessarily to Assad, it was to two other groups. I think, facts being facts, we can't expect the government of Syria to negotiate unless it feels that it's actually in a position where it might lose. And right now, not being dislodged is essentially winning. So I think we're a long way off from the conditions we need to see for talks to really move forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well now, so that's a very important point. I understand what you're saying there, that in putting this out there, in a way, he's saying to the Shiites and the Druze and whoever else, the Alawites, that we are open to negotiation. We are not, maybe, in a sense, he's taking back all those slogans about we're going all the way to the Mediterranean and to hell with everybody in our way and all that.
Yeah, he's reaching out, in a sense, to people who still support the government because they believe it's what protects them from extremist religious movements.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like he's probably got a pretty steep hill to climb there, since at the same time the rebels brag, I guess the ones actually doing the fighting, like to do suicide bombings, and they put out videos of them making little kids cut off a guy's head and all this kind of stuff, which seems to be saying, oh no, you're not safe, you better not negotiate with us, you don't have a prayer.
Well, that's exactly right. The facts on the ground are obviously much different from what a lot of the rhetoric is, and the minority groups have a real reason to feel threatened, I think.
So I guess, I don't know. During the Iraq War, there was this giant Sunni-based insurgency. There were Shiite members of it, obviously. But it was, at least on the leadership level, they were pretty much all Sunnis, and they were, fighting against the domination of the Shiite parties that the Americans and the Iranians were backing and installing in power there. And the Americans always claimed, pretty much, maybe if you really nail them down, they'd clarify, but mostly they claimed that the entire Sunni-based insurgency was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. In order, the only reason they're fighting us at all isn't for any legitimate Iraqi self-defense kind of a reason, nationalist or individual kind of reason. No, it's just because they're terrorists, and that's what terrorists do, kind of PR on the American side. And on the other hand, though, Al-Qaeda in Iraq were the ones setting off the bombs in the marketplaces, and they were the ones who were least afraid to die and were doing a lot of the fighting. And so even though they were a small percentage of the Sunni-based insurgency, they kind of helped the Americans out in grabbing all the headlines for themselves with some of their more spectacular craziness. And so I guess I wonder whether you think that's, pretty much a good analogy to what's going on here in Syria, where you have, at least the way it was explained to me, back when this thing first broke out, that it's sort of a 50-50 split with 50% Sunni Arabs, and then all the other minorities are the other 50% in a coalition supporting the dictatorship. And yet it's these al-Nusra beheaders and suicide bombers who are the ones who are the least afraid to die and therefore do the best fighting and are leading the rebellion and kind of screwing it up for everybody who really just wants to overthrow their police state in a very legitimate kind of way. I'm sorry for talking so much, but you understand where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah, well, there is, some parallel to the split between extremist militants and nationalist militants in Iraq, although I think what we're seeing here with the influence of Saudi and Qatari money in particular is these groups really are bigger in Syria. and are fielding like actual fighting brigades, as opposed to, you know, what you saw in Iraq, which was often very limited, you know, hit and run attacks, suicide bombings. So it is, to some extent, the Sunni community, you know, certainly the fighting is the Sunni community versus pretty much everyone else. That's fairly accurate, although the Kurds are split, the Palestinians are split, with, you know, militias forming to support either side in those communities. So, I mean, it is a little more nuanced than that. But, yeah, it's not an unfair parallel.
I wanted to make sure and kind of, you know, cover that part of it. I sound very often like I'm very anti-rebellion here, but really I'm just, you're a reporter, right? But I have an agenda here, which is I'm against American intervention on anybody's side in this thing at all. And that's, you know, paying Assad to torture people for us, or paying al-Qaeda suicide bombers to try to overthrow them, or anyone else. Now, but I do always identify with the average guy in the average town anywhere in the world. So if I was a Syrian of pretty much any category or whatever, however people define themselves, religion or ethnicity or whatever, I would like to see Assad shot. You know, he's a brutal dictator. What right does he have to inherit a dictatorship? None at all, of course. And then I do sort of sound like I'm probably smearing his opposition so much because they are suicide bombers, as you're saying, really brigade-sized numbers. I mean, they really, the rebellion really does seem to be being carried out by people who would very likely be much worse than Bashar al-Assad for the people of Syria, for the people of the region, for the future of spreading wars. I mean, you just barely mentioned Kurdistan there, but talk about the tinderbox where, as everyone says, it's not a matter of if, only when. This thing could really spread and really get out of control. It's already given Netanyahu the excuse to say, well, these aren't normal times, so now we're just going to go and do some more strikes in Syria. You know, before they had to claim they were taking out a nuclear reactor, which was a lie, by the way, but this time, you know, well, some missiles were being transferred, and so now I got the Israelis. Already this thing seems to be spreading, and anyway, I'm just saying, I'm not against average folk rebelling. I'm just against this mess and the American government making it my mess, if you understand what I mean, and I don't mean to be unfair to the people who, you know, of course, do have a right to throw off tyranny, you know?
Sure.
And, well, you know, as you're saying, you got brigades worth of these crazies, but then again, you've met a lot of plain old guys who just grab their rifle and want to overthrow their police state, as you're reporting on this thing from Syria, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a very populist element and plenty more people willing to fight than actually weapons.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure that's true, too. Big gun control country there in Syria, huh? So, now tell me this, and I think we've discussed this before, but I like hearing your take on it. The numbers of casualties from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. You say in this piece, David, January death toll in Syria rises as talks remain stalled. You say there are other groups who argue that the total is even higher, and I was wondering if you could tell me who those other groups are, because I sort of feel like I have nobody to compare this so-called observatory to.
There's the Syrian Network for Human Rights, which doesn't track government casualties, but does track casualties, and they tend to come out with higher civilian numbers, and the observatory has, I mean, the difference is about 10,000. The observatory's number now for all dead is over 50,000, and the Syrian Network's number is over 60,000. Wow.
And, well, now you reported on the Iraq War. I don't remember now anymore, David, which years, but you've reported on both of those. Numbers sound pretty credible to you compared to what you've seen in Iraq?
Yeah, no, I've spent some time documenting casualties and comparing them with what these groups come up with. And I think they're accurate. Like, I spent some time with the people on the ground who report to them, you know, just trying to get a sense if the reporting was accurate, and then what I've observed is that it is.
Okay. Well, I take that very seriously coming from you, for sure. What do you think about this Syrian observatory. I mean, I guess on the surface it's just some Syrian expat who's just trying to do right by his rebel friends back home, but sort of seems strange. You got this one guy in England who speaks for the entire insurgency all day, you know?
Well, that's a problem with journalism. Like I said, I mean, I've spoke with Dr. Abdul Rahman. I use him as a source frequently, because, like I said, I've met the people inside who are reporting out those figures and sending the videos and documenting evidence for the report that he more or less compiles and essentially publicizes. And he sort of oversees the effort. And so based on, you know, being with them and seeing what they were documenting and seeing their process, I really do believe that they're accurate. And he's also gone to great lengths, actually, to cultivate a network across the country on both sides so that he's able to document government casualties and civilian casualties in government-held areas, just like he's been able to do in rebel-held areas.
Okay, well, that's very good to know that you take him that seriously. I wasn't sure what to make of it, you know, even if his numbers are kind of...
I'm wary of things like that, and reporters should be. But like I said, I mean, I made an effort because, you know, to see who they were relying on the ground and whether it seemed accurate.
Tell me this, if you can. I saw this thing in UPI. I don't know if you saw it. Jihadist rebels in Syria, Zarqawi's legacy. And they're saying that you got not only just people who are veterans of al-Qaeda in Iraq and that war against the United States from a few years back, and they're still fighting the Maliki government in a way to some degree now, but even Zarqawi's brothers-in-law and his cousin are part of this thing in Syria, or have been part of this thing in Syria, and that a big part of this al-Nusra front, and I think they're citing this Quilliam Foundation, which I'm a little skeptical of. I don't know. But anyway, do you think that that's really fair to say that, like, this really is in large measure not just sort of, you know, Syrian al-Qaeda, but it really is al-Qaeda in Iraq? They just, you know, packed up their Toyotas and drove north.
There does seem to be some, you know, based on Nusra guys I've talked to, say, oh yeah, that commander's Iraqi, that commander's Iraqi. And also there were a lot of Syrians who went and fought with al-Qaeda in Iraq. There's also a large element of former members of groups like Jund al-Sham and Fatah al-Islam, which were used as proxies by the Syrian government. So there's which also then channeled these guys to Iraq in some cases. Or in some cases arrested them when they said they were going to Iraq. The Syrian government was quite fickle with some of these proxy groups at times, and wary of the fighters, and then, you know, turning against the Syrian government, which now they have. But there is I mean, it's becoming more regional. You know, there are lots of Lebanese fighters as well, and the Lebanese-Palestinian camps, to some extent, are becoming centers of operation for these groups outside of Syria. So you have both blowback from Syria's involvement in Iraq, and then, you know, al-Qaeda and the Islamic State of Iraq does seem to be branching out a bit.
Wow, and Fatah al-Islam, is that the same group that Hirsch reported back a few years ago about the CIA was trying to support them in Lebanon against Hezbollah?
Yeah, that's the same group.
Good times. The redirection, I think, was the article, and the policy. And tell me what you think about that. Is this whole thing just about America's now? They realize that, oops, they empowered Iran big time with the Iraq war, but now that they're doing this redirection just toward the Saudis and the Sunnis in general, and that's kind of what's going on here with overthrowing the Alawites?
Well, it's not really a redirection. It's kind of the policy that we've always had. To some extent, there's not a lot of credible evidence that they've ever gotten very far with Sunni proxy militias in Lebanon in recent years. You know, no group would really want American support. But yeah, you know, Saddam Hussein was supported against the Iranians, despite Iran-Contra. So yeah, you do have sort of a, I mean, I guess really Iraq was kind of a blip in its empowerment of Iran.
Yeah, that George W. Bush sure was dumb. All right, well.
Yeah. It did seem to kind of surprise them.
Yeah, well, and of course he had the real geniuses. They knew what to do. They were the dumbest of all. All right. Now, so what was I going to ask you? Well, I can't remember. So I'm going to ask you about the Kurds. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Kurdish relationship with the dictatorship in Syria? As you said, already they're split.
Some Kurds have joined the rebels, and some Kurds are fighting essentially for Kurdish autonomy, which has led to fighting between rebel groups and the Kurdish militia that's linked to the largest political party in the Kurdish area of Syria, which is called PYD. And so for the last 3 months or so, there have been sort of off and on clashes between the rebels who want to move further east toward the Iraqi border through the Kurdish area and the Kurdish militia, which is refusing to let them pass.
And you got the Turks bombing the Kurds in Iraq and Maliki siding with Assad. And I'm having trouble keeping it all straight these days, David.
Yeah, Iraq's kind of a mess.
Well, can you talk a little bit about that? Because, you know what? I haven't seen much good journalism out of Iraq lately except this lady in the Christian Science Monitor who I can't get a hold of to talk on the show.
Obviously the central Iraqi government is aligned with the Syrian government, and the Kurdish regional government, which essentially has autonomy in Iraq's north, is at odds with the central government over oil contracts and land. And they're also trying to support Kurdish autonomy inside Syria, which is contradictory to, obviously, the Syrian government, which is allied with the Iraqi central government. So the Syrian issue is becoming an issue amongst the different Iraqi factions, some of whom support one side, some of whom support another.
All right, so now, I guess, as you were saying before, I don't want to pretend to quote you because I don't remember exactly the words, but you were sort of saying the government of Syria, they have not lost this thing yet, and it doesn't even look inevitable that they will at this point. It's sort of a stalemate, is that right?
Well, it's the regime is contracting, but they still have air power. They're training militia to supplant the army, which is a short-term solution, but, will prolong things. I think there's still a certain trajectory. But, any sort of outright rebel military victory, I think, is very far away.
The Kurdistan thing, at least, as Iraqi Kurdistan, it seems like that the tension over Kirkuk has been simmering. I mean, people were getting killed and kidnapped and sort of... It was a slower motion ethnic cleansing than we saw in Baghdad during the war, right?
They're having elections. They're having elections, provincial elections in April. And as in all of the local provincial elections since 2005, 2004, they won't be held in Kirkuk province because it's too sensitive an issue.
Well, that's good to hear.
So, yeah, you're exactly right. It's a slow burn.
And explain that, right? This is the deal. If the people of Kirkuk vote, they'll vote that Kirkuk belongs to Kurdistan, not to lower Iraq, and that's the big deal because that's where all the oil's at, right? Well, you go ahead and say it. What's the vote, and what's the point of avoiding it?
Outright warfare, avoiding outright warfare. Eventually one side will just attempt to take it over. And so neither side, I think, is very interested in doing that right at the moment, but they're definitely posturing.
All right. Well, listen, we're all out of time. Thank you so much for your time, David. It's great reporting.
Anytime. Thank you.
And be careful.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Everybody, that's David Enders on the phone from Beirut, reporting for McClatchy Newspapers. Hey, y'all, Scott here. First of all, thanks to the show's sponsors and donors who make it possible for me to do this. Secondly, I need more sponsors and more donors if the show is to continue. ScottHorton.org/donate has all the links to use PayPal, Give.org, Google Wallet, WePay.com, and even Bitcoins to make a donation in any amount. You can also sign up for monthly donations of small and medium-sized amounts through PayPal and Give.org. Again, that's ScottHorton.org/donate for all the links. To advertise on the site or the show, email me, Scott@ScottHorton.org. And thanks. Hey ladies, Scott Horton here. If you would like truly youthful, healthy, and healthy-looking skin, there is one very special company you need to visit, Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. Dagny & Lane has revolutionized the industry with a full line of products made from organic and all-natural ingredients that penetrate deeply with nutrient-rich ionic minerals and antioxidants for healthy and beautiful skin. That's Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. And for a limited time, add promo code SCOTT15 at checkout for a 15% discount. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here, inviting you to check out the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. They've got a brand new website with new and improved access to more than 20 years worth of essays promoting the cause of liberty. And FFF's writers, including Jacob Hornberger, Jim Bovard, Sheldon Richman, Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, and more, aren't just good. They're the best at opposing and discrediting our corrupt overlords in Washington and their warfare, welfare, regulatory police state. That's the Future Freedom Foundation's new and improved site at FFF.org. The Emergency Committee for Israel, Brookings, Heritage, AIPAC, WINEP, JINSA, PNAC, CNAS, the AEI, FPI, CFR, and CSP. It sure does seem sometimes like the war party's got the foreign policy debate in D.C. all locked up. But not quite. Check out the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. They put America first, opposing our government's world empire, and especially their Middle Eastern madness. That's the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. Hey y'all, Scott Horton here, inviting you to check out wallstreetwindow.com. It's a financial blog written by former hedge fund manager Mike Swanson, who's investing in commodities, mining stocks, and European markets. Wall Street Window is unique in that Mike shows people what he's really investing in and updates you when he buys or sells in his main account. Mike thinks his positions are going to go up because of all the money the Federal Reserve is printing to finance the deficit. See what happens at wallstreetwindow.com. And Mike's got a great new book coming out, so also keep your eye on writer MichaelSwanson.com for more details.